Hello, everyone. This is Claudiu Murgan, the host of the Spiritual Inspire Show. And my guest today is Carol Kilby. Carol remembers falling in love with writing in public school. Journaling, poetry, prose, dreamwork. Writing has been her long life refuge. It is a spiritual practice like yoga or prayer, turning the invisible, the mystery, fear, love, and passion into the visible world. It's my way of discovering and becoming myself, she said. Perhaps it was inevitable that Carol will turn to writing to make sense of the spiritual crisis born of global warming and mass extinctions. Incorporating the emerging consciousness of interconnectivity and the new sacred story of the universe into rituals and her own original wisdom tales, she has found a way to offer up a relevant and transforming word for these confusing and challenging times. Carol left ministry in a Protestant Canadian church when awakened to the urgency of the environmental crisis. For 16 years, Carol ran the Gaia Center for Eco Spirituality and Sustainable Work in Algonquin Highlands, Ontario. She is the author of the book Evolutionary Dancer. Carol, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you, Claudiu. You're one of the people that I meet now that I have in fact stepped out of a strictly Christian culture, and you're one of the folks that expand my consciousness and what it means to be human.
Thank
I'm
you.
grateful to be with you.
Thank you. And I really enjoyed reading the book. It is as much a spiritual read as is an ecological manifesto. Um, I'm almost done, to be honest. I'm not finished yet, and I'm impressed with every single page I'm turning.
Oh, thank you so much.
In the beginning of the Evolutionary Dancer, you provide some figures in terms of church attendance over the years, which overall dropped dramatically. But a statement that drew my attention is as congregations shrunk, the clergy could sometimes feel there was more interest in growing the number of bumps in the pews than the spirituality of a community. Why do you think the church is still going after quantity instead of quality, which implicitly will bring the quantity?
There's a general struggle right now, and it's a struggle that is is decades old, a struggle that's decades old. It is the struggle that was capitalized in the last 4 years in the American politics. Let's make America great again. In the times of greatest chaos, uncertainty, we turn around. We want to go back. And if we can just capture what was the highlight of our lives, of our heyday, then we're going to be okay. But the reality is, and somebody said this on the webinar that I held that you attended, when we were looking at what are we feeling? What is this dance of identity that we're in the middle of right now? And there were a number of clergy, retired clergy in that webinar. And one of them said, I've lost my sense of trust. And so these are incredibly upsetting times. And so what do we reach for? We naturally reach for what we know. Well, I don't think the church is what it was when I began to write that book a decade ago. I think there have been, in fact, a number of incredible changes and and restructuring and looking for other ways of being the church. So I want to honor those congregations, those denominations that are doing that.
Okay. So, in other words, you see transformation within the church and also within the ideas the church is portraying right now or explaining and disseminating during the Sunday Mass as well, or they are going through the transformation, but the message is pretty much the same?
Well, I wish I had all of the perfect answers to that. I'll give some examples of both and. So where change often happens, first and foremost, is theologically in new understandings. And that usually happens in academia or in the higher structures of the church. So for example, in the Roman Catholic Church, the document that was put out by the Vatican most recently on creation is fantastic. This is a reclaiming of the very earliest Christian scholars, and they are embracing a theology that embraces the earth and the universe as a manifestation of the divine. Mm-hmm. And they're calling the church back into relationship with it. There are some churches in the Roman Catholic tradition here in Toronto that are embracing that and are studying creation, speaking of creation in a new way. But that's not across the board. And the other thing that's real is that the person in the pew, if they are going to church, reaching out for what is known as source of comfort and promise, that's not the message they want to hear. One of the things that I discovered in my stepping out of the church in my encounter with so many other sources of wisdom was just how human-centric, anthropocentric Christianity had become. And so that's an amazing shift that we're asking of ourselves. And there are a number of denominations and traditions and congregations, and they can be bright lights within the larger whole, leading a denomination, leading a community to a new ideology and a new understanding and a new relationship with the larger whole. And then there are others who are still entrenching in Jesus as the only truth, way, and the life, and religion, faith, belief as a pursuit of eternal life.
Yes, so sometimes I compare what you went through when you step out of the church is like me changing jobs. My first job in Canada was amazing. I worked for a bank for 3.5 years, and I thought that that's an amazing universe. And then when I stepped out and got to that new job, I realized, wow, there are more people out there. There'll be more entertaining or more to learn from a different job, more people to meet, more financial benefits. So I'm evolving. I am moving along the path of professional path, and I'm finding new things every day. So this is how I compare your move, finding new perspective to spirituality, not religion, but spirituality, and evolving by meeting new people and new concepts.
Yeah, that experience of our lives expanding, of ourselves becoming, that's absolutely key to what I've discovered or describe as evolutionary spirituality. And in the webinar recently, we did a ritual called the Dance of Identity. And one of the comments afterwards was, only by walking out of, by relinquishing, by letting go of that identity that has shaped and formed us and told us who we are and what we are and how to be and where we're going, only by the letting go can you actually come back to become and to walk into a pattern that's cosmic. The very nature of the universe is expansive. You know, with something that started, scientists have speculated, as the size of a grapefruit, not a very big bang after all, but is now 13.8 billion years old, and I can't even cite the amount of light years across. I don't think I can even count. I know I can't count that high. That's an expansive nature of reality itself. And if we're a manifestation of that universe, it's got to be that our nature is expansive if we don't hinder it by and chain it and prison it with stories.
Yes, because it is said that we are a smaller version of the universe, which is out there. That means if the universe expands, we should expand as well.
I think one of the things that is still challenging for me is that the universe isn't out there, that I am the universe, that the universe is working in and through me. One of the guests that we hosted at the Gaia Center for Eco-Spirituality and Sustainable Work was a shamanic practitioner. And Jeanette used to say, as above, as out there, so within. And you know, and I struggle with that all the time, to understand that those powers that were the way by which the universe expanded and it is expanding, cataclysm, which is always leading to creation and emergence, that's moving in and through all the levels of life as we know it. So we could say politically, we could say in terms of the ecology and the health of the ecology as we know the earth. We can see those crises, those pandemics right now, the political upheaval and stress, the economic breakdown. That's the universe that's, you know, in a systemic change right now. Yes. So you may have noticed that first chapter was called The Mirror Dance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, it is fascinating to me to see how your language has changed after leaving the church. You talk about grandmother universe, you know, shamanic experiences, ecological culture, and much more than that. So to me, no meaning or sacredness in our lives is lost by using this language. In fact, adds more value. And as you said, it's evolutionary. Why do you think that this language is still not accepted by people in other circles, like the one you left?
Yeah. Well, language is key to identity. And so, so some of my language is understood to be Canadian, and by my American family, I might say napkin, and they would say serviette, and some of my language is cultural. So what I mean by conservatism is not understood in the same way in France. Also, this was a wonderful understanding of where language might be trying to say something similar, but sounds very different. You'll remember that story of me being in the presence of a scientist who's telling us the story of the new universe. And he says, since the beginning, there has been birth and death and resurrection. Well, my old Christian ears perked right up, and I feel I'm at home. But what he was really talking about was the birth of stars growing into a supernova that dies this explosive death, turbulent death, and in fact births with its scattered stardust of chemical components, new stars and planets in the future, spreads that universe. That's resurrection to him. Well, let's call that, by the scientific language, of emergence, cataclysm, and transformation. So language, but and I was saying, I discovered actually, and I was writing that chapter on resurrection and Easter, that resurrection, which I'd always thought was particular to Christianity. In fact, many people, many different disciplines speak of resurrection. Medically we define it in one way, and legally we define it in another way, and religiously and spiritually and scientifically. So, but language takes a great deal of time to change. And we're impatient, those of us who think we know the real nature of reality are a bit impatient with those who don't speak the same language of that reality.
And do you think that while we are evolving to a different level of consciousness, the language has to evolve with us at the same time?
I think language is a vessel of consciousness. It's more particularly, it's an evolutionary vessel of consciousness. And listen, if in 20 years my language has changed so dramatically, and it's kind of second nature to me now, and makes me quite an alien in certain circles, it's changing pretty darn quickly. If I've met that many people that have reshaped my perspective and my language, I think actually language is evolving faster than we know.
Yeah, my prediction is that if we evolve our awareness and consciousness to the next level, then we can be able to communicate telepathically. So in a way, language will not become the main tool of interaction, will be our thoughts and how we feel. And I know for a fact, at least from what I was told, there are tribes in Australia, the indigenous tribes there, the majority of time they communicate telepathically. There is no requirement for words. So they are so evolved in their consciousness and awareness that thought is enough. No word is necessary.
I think I'll speak to what I know here. And one of the great shifts is the coming out of the woo-woo closet of communication happening between the invisible and the visible realms, between that threshold we call death and life. And so in my book, I recall my conversations with the members of a congregation, and where I re-examine Easter and resurrection as something that is actually not an experience of one particular time and one particular individual to which we all aspire. But it is a very normal part of life. And so I told some stories of receiving visits from my mother a week after we had stood by her graveside, and having her one more time at my bedside, 2 or 3 in the morning, not unlike what she used to do, where she would tuck all of her family in and assure us everything was fine. And I told this story because it didn't happen just to me. It happened to my father and my sister and my older daughter. We all shared this experience and this story, which gave all of us permission to tell it to people beyond our family. But that story freed many similar stories in that circle of elders. And so that relationship, that connection with consciousness, which is what continues after death, I've come to believe, and which science has given us all sorts of proof to say emphatically is so. That relationship continues. But where we could say it's speeding up, more common in this evolutionary moment, where do we look for that? To the channeling. And so the books channeled from Seth, the tapes available from Abram, Lazarus, these are the names of consciousness, entities of consciousness in the life beyond the visible. And what are they doing? They're coming together and they are communicating through individuals to offer wisdom that humanity needs desperately and essentially to be able to continue as a species in a time of environmental crisis.
Yes, I mean, the church does a lot of good for many people. They go there to find a refuge, to clear their mind. But at the same time, there are people who will hold tight these type of experiences because they don't fit into the template and the church is telling every Sunday or in general. It's a dogma which people are afraid to step outside of or to challenge, and that's the problem. And spirituality gives you the opportunity to be yourself, to express your soul and your talents and your life purpose, to find your life purpose. So I think this is the line which some people will cross into spirituality, and some are so afraid that they will be punished if they step across that boundary, and they will always stay within the limit you kind of escape or you decided to step out of.
Stepping out of a very clear understanding of life and death and purpose and path into a dance of many, many understandings of life and death and purpose and life's path, I believe is part of this evolutionary moment. And so what I've come to understand of religion and the institution called the church, and of the Jesus events, of the Buddha events, of the Muhammad events, and those religions that created, formed, and shaped cultures around those events. I see them now as vessels of conscious evolution in a particular time and a place through particular human
Yes.
who we could call avatars. So, and only now are we coming to incarnate those stories to say that wasn't just about them. That's a mirror of what and who, how humanity can be. Selfless, about the whole before the individual, free of dualism, where the divinity lived in and through them. And so I have a lovely new understanding of the church, of religion, as a vessel of conscious evolution. The other thing I discovered, however, and this was in the chapter on evolutionary epiphanies, 3 discoveries, and then I'll go back to somebody that became very important for me in all of that, brought me to that. 3 epiphanies. Religion is evolving now. Humanity's evolving now. And God is evolving. And that still blows my mind and heart a little bit. But this, I was able to come to this through the teachings and the encounters with Barbara Marx Hubbard, who has since joined the Ancestors, but who spoke so deeply, so personally, was so committed to her own conscious evolution and her evolution into a new kind of human. And so she truly believed that there are numbers among us who are evolved humans, what she called the Homo universalis, the human who could be in full relationship with the non-human and with the larger cosmos right from the heart, at a heart level. And so she used to speak about, putting on evolutionary eyes. And so I write about that. And it's been truly a gift to me. And I'm not sure it's brought me a lot closer to the hurt and the pain of an individual, but it helps me look at the pains and the problems of our times and see them through much bigger eyes.
I want to continue with another quote from your book. Christ, no longer a synonym for Jesus of Nazareth, became the cosmic Christ of creativity that has been there since the beginning. And this tied into the concept of the controversial concept of reincarnation. So how transformational was for you that acknowledgement of the Christ consciousness concept?
Wow, almost beyond words, so transformational, because because in the beginning, Jesus was synonymous with the Christ, the manifestation of the divine creator in heaven as a human on earth. A sacrifice of that divinity, a way to that divinity, a promise of life eternal. Jesus was a formula. And the rituals that am taught and made it possible to connect with that larger being and that larger promise They were transformational. But all of that particular Jesus was embraced, cradled in an ideology of dualism. And that dualism and the elevation of the human above the non-human, I came to see as a perspective, as a hermeneutic, as a way of looking at things that gave the human cultures and societies based on a particular period of Christianity to, applaud capitalism and fan the waves of environmental devastation.
Yeah, so someone might yell blasphemy right now, but that's okay. I mean, I like that. No, I was joking.
I didn't quite get it, so you might want to cut this whole piece out. But
I will do that.
So if you could say what you said before, that's okay. I'd love to.
It's fine. So
I'd love to hear it again.
I said someone might yell blasphemy.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Blasphemous. I am. But this is an early piece of Christianity that we can reclaim now and we can recover. In the community of John in the late 1st century, they would actually gather in a circle and dance with the cosmic Christ. And there are recorded and available to us the words, a hymn to the cosmic Christ that is there in the 1st chapter of the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word. You translate the word. That goes back to the original language meaning creative energy. So yes. How scientific is that? How cosmic is that? That's to them. So we've lost that with the personalization of the Jesus and salvation.
Yes. Yeah, there are so many, let's say, most important or some important words which were mistranslated or their meaning was lost throughout the eons, the millennia. So yes, we have to be conscious of this type of meanings which were not meant at that time with through the right translation, through the wrong translation. So we have to adapt also to what's new and to the new discoveries, as you said.
But there's a reason why, not just for truth. The reason why this is so important for the evolution of our understandings is because of what our previous understandings have allowed us to do to the gift of the earth and the gift of our species and the gift of all the other species. The book on the front cover, as you could see, says evolutionary wisdom, stories, and rituals to end planet abuse. We have to find our way back to our understanding of ourselves as an expression of this planet and as one and interdependently one with the whole.
Yeah, and you said that our environmental crisis is a spiritual crisis these days. Why do you think is that?
Why did I say that? The environmental crisis is a spiritual crisis because it's one of connection. It's one of identity. It's one of divinity. And so the divinity is not separate above and beyond. The sacred is in every cell of biological life. Each thing is an absolute manifestation of a sacred intelligence that is at the heart of all things that are universe. So the divine does not live in my heart. God does not live in a sunset. It is recovering. It is putting on a lens of awe and wonder to be able to come to gratitude for and relationship with the water that I drink and the soil that I walk on and the tree that shades me and the roots that sustain the soil around me. And only when we come back to that sacred relationship with the mother, the earth, the father, the son, the brother, the winds, and the sisters, the creatures, will we fall in love again with life itself and protect it.
Yes. So again, I found so many good passages in your book that I have to keep reading them. Another one, my vocation, once growing the church, became aiding the evolution of consciousness in myself, my society, my religious tradition. God, I came to understand as the evolutionary impulse. I now strive to align with those of the cosmos, higher consciousness, greater complexity, and deeper interdependence. I close the quote. So now that this internal evolution took place, when you look back, do you think the goals of what you set up for yourself while part of the church were too small? Did you feel that you really achieve much, much more now than before?
Just reach for my book and turn. You're going to want to cut this, but this is on page 261. And I have to keep coming back to this. This is what I've discovered in these disturbing and distressing times. My stories are too small. My nation's holidays are too trite. My religion's traditions ignore the evolutionary possibility in this planetary crisis. And this is what I need. Rites and practices that calm my chaos and transform my powerlessness. And I believe evolutionary rituals meet these needs. I don't use the word worship anymore. I strive, and I'm not very good at it yet. I strive to see each day and each element of life that I encounter as a celebration. I see the universe as a mode of celebration. Let's grasp that one. I mean, can you believe it? You, Claudiu, are a mode of celebration. You are the way that the universe celebrates. Isn't that stunning?
Yes, celebrates through every single one of us, you know.
And that tree outside the window, there's 4 of them out there. I called them the 4 sisters. And the microorganisms in a rock. And so one of the chapters in my book I think it's called I Spy with My Evolutionary Eye, I talk about the windows that we hung up all across the Gaia Center land. And windows to say, look here, look at the soil, look at the microorganisms, look at this as a celebration, a way of celebration. What are we celebrating? The creative energy that is the very essence of it all, the evolutionary impulse that is the driving heart of it all. I'm not sure if I answered
Yes.
your question.
No, that leads very nicely into my next question. I mean, we both experience shamanic ceremonies, maybe different type of ceremonies, but nevertheless, we experience those. And they're very engaging. All the participants are part of the ceremony, of what's going on, of the invocation of the skies, of the all the livings above and below, and you have the smudging, and you have everything which is part of the ceremony. Everyone is involved. Um, how did you feel when you went through your first ceremony, and compared to the type of mass you're doing before, when to me was very disengaging? I mean, I was in the pew, staying there, sitting or mumbling something, and then the priest reading from the Bible. Um, so to me, this type of ceremony, shamanic ceremony or indigenous ceremony, was much more involving, gave him much more satisfaction, because it asked for me to participate, and at the same time explaining what the energies are around me, and how thankful I should be, as you said, for all the vibration in nature.
The first time I experienced a shamanic ritual of smudging and the four directions, calling on the four directions, I was still a clergy in a very liberal-minded congregation who were awakening, we were all awakening to the role of the Christian institution in Canada in the residential schools for Indigenous children. It was just after the United Church had made a formal apology. And so there was a great awakening happening. The residential school, the last residential school, was barely closed in the 1980s when this was happening, when this ritual was happening, when the apology was made. So this evolution of consciousness is very, very recent in us all. So how did it feel? Well, when I had already assumed, and the church had taught me how to experience guilt very well, so I already assumed a very, an incredible role in this responsibility that I was bearing the burden of. We all bear the burden of from our culture and our religion. So there was that. Then there was a great discomfort. One, because it was very strange and very new. It was, and I was still having to take off the judgments that a ritual of smoke and because I was a Protestant, we didn't have rituals of incense in our services. And so I wasn't quite sure if this was going to be given the stamp of approval by my God. And so, and now we're in a very highly polished sanctuary, lots of pews and beautifully highly polished. And we're passing this vessel of smoke and embers around, and some elders are coughing and so on. And so there didn't feel terribly, it didn't feel fairly transformative. It felt more just uncomfortable. The unknown, something we've just declared in an earlier Sunday to be, not very sacred. I mean, it was an experience of contradictions, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So jump now 20 years, 2 decades, and I'm at the Gaia Center, and it's a wintry day, and the shamanic practitioner is invited us to come outside of the farmhouse, cross the porch, and be smudged. And we're doing that in the cold. We're doing that in the wintry white, where we can see the smoke that is our breath coming into relationship with the cold air around us. And we can see the white pines framing this porch and the driveway ahead of us. Does that not feel like a sanctuary most fitting for a smudging?
Yes, indeed.
And even though I had not grown up with the teaching of what this is to represent or what is to happen in this time, it is a cleansing. And so you move from a smudging transported into a polished sanctuary with gold brass on a table, to an outside where it is at home in its setting. And you just know, you just feel the difference between a sacred that is defined and prescribed to a sacred that is encountered and experienced.
Yes. Yeah, you feel it in a different way for sure. And you mentioned, again, tying very nicely into my next question, is a subject which also upsets me when I talk to my guest about it. Um, is the another quote from your book: misappropriation of scripture has served to justify colonialism and to issue captains of manufacturing tickets of entitlement, privilege, and power. By failing to see this text for the liberation theology it is, we became captives ourselves to wrong beliefs about God, humanity, and nature. And we took these concepts to South America, Africa, and that notion of entitlement turn us humans, doesn't matter if we're Catholics or whatever, into seeing other humans as prey and ready to be taken advantage of. And I read about horror stories in both South America and Africa, certain countries in Africa. But we had them here in our own backyard in Ontario, in Canada. You just mentioned some of them. And that's a legacy which I don't know can ever be erased or maybe forgiven for sure. But also some people have to come out and apologize for all those atrocities.
There's a very interesting pattern in the ecological story. And it is that one of the ways that life advances in the early part of the Earth story. So we're talking cellular life, we're talking the story of bacteria, and very early on, the bacteria, and this is our first ancestor. How does that ancestor pursue life? Through a number of different paths. One is the predator-prey dance. And so cellular life at a certain point is, as it is, in its shape and form, is threatened. And so it preys on another cell and ingests that life into its own and strengthens itself and becomes a new kind of being. And that predator-prey dance is still visible today as a hawk fishes a salmon, ingests that, and one life is given to ingest to strengthen another. Just as the salmon feeds on the plankton at the bottom of that river. And so the predator-prey dance is not only something that has been non-human. The predator-prey dance in search of territory and habitat has also been lived out in the human species from very early on. And this is something we're still evolving beyond. And so I see that pattern in the dance between Christian and Indigenous. I'll only speak to my own experience, but perhaps it was there in the dance between Jew and Muslim in other parts of the world, or Hindu and Buddhist in other parts of the world, and certainly between Christian and Buddhist and Hindu and Muslim in other parts of the world. The more I get my juice, where I get my faith is in that evolutionary story that says consciousness is evolving even now, and the kind of humans that are on the next step from the evolutionary staircase are humans that are understanding the differentiation as a gift, as another mode of celebration, and that mutuality is the way of survival.
Thank you. A while back, you left the Gaia farm and you moved back to the city. What happened with that concept?
With the concept?
Yes.
Of the Gaia Center?
Yeah, Eco Center, yes.
Well, very early on, as we tried to turn this Gaia, the farmhouse that we named Gaia, into a center and a place where we hosted teachers of cosmology, teachers of the ancient Christian mystics, teachers of shamanism and Buddhism and so on. As we hosted them, we hosted teachers that who offered us a teaching in being Gaia-centered, not human-centered. I came to the realization that it wasn't a place. It wasn't 4 acres. It was a way of being. It was a way of being, living as Gaia-centered. It was a place of love and intuition and response that was within us. So we took some of these programs and their teachers that had an allurement for numbers much larger than we could host in that farmhouse. And we took those teachers to Aurelia and to Peterborough and to Toronto and so on, to larger centers, always inviting, a Gaia-centered consciousness to emerge and grow community and affect community and transform society in different ways. So the concept of the Gaia-centeredness permeates the book, and I think is key to moving forward as individuals who say, yes, the greatest thing that I can aspire to every morning is my own conscious evolution.
Yeah. Other than promoting the book, what keeps you busy these days?
On a new website keeps me busy, keeping it updated with invitations to folks to become part of an evolutionary ritual community that's meeting once a month. And at the back of the book, there are 4 examples of these evolutionary rituals. But in fact, I had already rituals for every sacred Christian holy holiday and the secular holidays that we as a culture celebrate. I already have evolutionary rituals to mark those. And so I'm inviting people once a month to join me on at the website on one of these evolutionary rituals and test them out, feel them, respond to them. And so talk about that. How did that feel? What was different? Is that a threshold ritual? Is it don't open a doorway, a different way of being human? So that's what keeps me very busy.
Please show us the book.
This is the book.
Yes.
Evolutionary Dancer, out in and on the fringe of the church. And you can see the waters rising around the evolutionary dancer's feet and around the church. And that's the back, and it brings forward some of the words from some of the incredible people that have been gracious enough to write an endorsement for it. Evolutionary Christians themselves. I'll name a few.
Please.
Matt Fox, who in the 80s was silenced by the Vatican. And after a year of being silenced, broke the silence by saying, as I was saying, and then went on to found transformative universities such as the University of Creation Spirituality, where I took a master's in that discipline. And Derma Dumurku, another priest and historian, and he wrote Evolutionary Faith and Quantum Theology. And an evolutionary evangelist, Reverend Michael Dowd, also the sister and author of a book. Her name is Jan Phillips, and she was the author of No Ordinary Time, and she's still a very active evolutionary, I'll call her, in the area of conscious evolution.
Yeah. So, Carol, we're approaching the end of the interview. Any final thoughts?
My own challenge is to commit each morning to becoming more of an evolutionary. My invitation to any of your watchers is to join me. But mostly, I think there's gratitude for being alive and awakening in this time in history. For seeing, perhaps more fully than many of my immediate family or the ancestors, the incredible nature of life as it is, a celebration, a mode of the holy to manifest itself in and through everything and us. Wow. Gratitude to the people who you talk to, Claudiu, and the teachers that you host, who clearly are evolutionaries, helping us as a humanity and a society and a religious traditions to evolve.
Thank you very much for being my guest today, Carol. It's been a pleasure.
And to you, thanks to the book for helping me meet more people like you, Claudiu. All the
Yes,
best, and thank you for your incredible work.
thank you. And to my viewers, thank you for watching. Share it, like it. And you can support me on patreon.com/Claudiu Murgan. Also, you can comment on the video. Let's start the conversation and all become evolutionary dancers. Until next time, love and gratitude.